Welcome to the Tournament Center here at PAX during the World Championships. I'm David-Marshall. I'm joined by Pro Tour Hall of Famer Luis Scott-Vargas, and we're about to watch the second of two drafts from the first draft pod here at the World Championship. Let's take a look at the table graphic and get your thoughts on what's going on here at this table. We're going to be watching Mike Sigrist, the number 2 ranked player in the world. What are you thinking about we're going to see from this draft, Luis?
Well, what's kind of interesting is we just saw the player passing to Mike Sigrist. We saw Shahar Shenhar. So we kind of know where Shahar's at, and we can kind of use that to when we're talking about Mike Sigrist's draft.
What are you expecting this will look like? If you were getting past those packs from Shahar Shenhar, what do you think that draft would have looked like for you?
Kind of for Sigrist's sake, I hope he's drafting blue. Shahar cut blue in pack 1, but pack 3 just kept going, and more specifically affinity. There were a lot of good affinity cards in pack 1. Didn't see a lot in pack 2, so that could kind of clue us in. And if Sigrist was in affinity, he got a pretty good, cranial plating 3rd or 4th pick there.
All right, let's see how it played out. Let's watch the draft with Mike Sigrist. Okay, there we go. You see Mike Sigrist laying out his cards, picking them up.
And the first thing to note, too, is that Shahar did pass an arrest pick 2 as a kind of like the obviously best card. Or he picked 3, I guess, for Sigrist, so.
There's a Midnight Banshee.
Midnight Banshee is a powerful card to start your draft with. It being triple black is not the most flexible, so I wouldn't be surprised if Sigrist did something like take Nest Invader here, but he's got a couple options, and he's kind of put them towards the front. Daggerclaw Imp, I've found, doesn't go in as many archetypes as you might think, just because so many of these decks are so focused.
So you thinking about those as cards that might come back around the table?
Yeah, that's the other thing is once he could have easily already decided his pick and then is counting out the other 8 cards. So yeah, he's just slamming the Midnight Banshee.
Yeah, and he was sort of sorting some spirits and some black cards.
Because when you take the Banshee, what you're really looking for is one of the decks is drafting black-white spirits and trying to see, is Waxmane Baku going to come back around? Well, probably not, but.
Yeah. So this is the pack that we saw opened.
And a Precursor Golem got taken out of this pack. Oblivion Ring is a pretty clear first pickable card, in this case second, and it also does put you into black-white, which again is kind of where you want to be heading with that Banshee, because the Banshee, despite being a very powerful card, is not a card you play in like a 5-color deck. Another really good deck is black-green tokens, and Algerial is one of the best cards in that deck.
He looks pretty set on, the Oblivion Ring here.
And again, I think we're in the counting phase of if I take Oblivion Ring, is this Scuttling Death or is this Kami of the Ancient Law gonna come back around?
All right.
And so we're expecting an arrest here. That seems like it could be a pretty obvious pick. Shahar took Kozilek's Predator out of that pack, and one of the reasons to take Kozilek's Predator is you're trying to go into green-white. Unfortunately, passing an arrest does make that a little more difficult in pack 2. And if you're Sigrist, I think you would like to wheel Kami of Ancient Law, but you're still just pretty happy to take arrest. Another thing to note is that Sigrist isn't locked into playing Midnight Banshee at this point. Assuming he takes this arrest, he's got 2 very good single white cards and a triple black card, which he may or may not play, because he hasn't really been past any good black cards, and it's pretty easy to get off playing a triple black.
How often do you have to get away from your first pick in this format?
A fair amount, because the decks do tend to be so linear. They're so dependent on having all the right synergies, like if you're drafting affinity, or if you're drafting tokens, if you're drafting elementals, that you could end up even in the colors of your first pick and not play your first pick. That is something that happens.
Right, so he has a Glenhawk Idol sort of shuffled towards the front here.
This is actually one of the big turning points in the draft, and I'm really curious to see how it goes, because if Sigrist takes Glenhawk Idol, he's leaning towards drafting an affinity or white-based aggro deck. If he takes Moonlit Strider, he's leaning towards drafting the Spirits deck, the black-white Spirits deck. So this is going to determine really a lot of the tenor of his draft as it goes forward. And it looks like he's leaning towards Glenhawk Idol.
Yeah.
I like that pick. And the reason is I don't really love the black-white Spirits deck in this format, and taking Glenhawk Idol opens you up to drafting either affinity or something like red-white. And kind of get paid off here because there's no card for black-white, and Court Homunculus is one of the more important cards for the affinity deck. In fact, the affinity deck sometimes can just be basically mono-white. Josh Utter-Layton drafted an affinity deck at Grand Prix Las Vegas that had something like 3 Darksteel Citadels and 12 planes was its mana base, or 11 planes. It was like a 14 or 15 land deck. And Court Homunculus is a really big part of that, because if you get 3 or 4 or even 5, then all of a sudden you're just this incredibly efficient beatdown deck.
Yeah, you're just playing a Savannah Lions deck.
Yeah, except your Savannah Lions are 2/2s, and they also just have synergy with all the rest of your cards.
There's a Kami of Ancient Law.
There's
There's a Fairy Mechanist pretty late. How do you like that card in this deck compared to, he's got the Carapace there?
It's kind of funny. Fairy Mechanist was really good in the Modern Masters 1 affinity deck, and is less good in this one. I think I like it a little more than the Carapace here, but it's very close.
He doesn't have a ton of artifacts at this point.
No, but
it's more speculative.
But I think his expectation is that he's going to get them. It's pretty bad to draft this deck if people upstream are drafting it, but I think at this point you can be at least somewhat safe. That you saw Mirror Enforcer in an earlier pack. You know, Court Homunculus, Fairy Mechanist. It does look fairly open, and
he did take the Mechanist, and now he has the option of a Frogmite, a Sphere of the Suns.
Sphere of the Suns is actually, funnily enough, very good in this deck too, because it's like a land that's also an artifact, and it helps you splash, especially since the deck often wants to play a ton of plains and not a ton of islands. But Frogmite, if you really think you're going to get there, Frogmite is awesome. If you half get there, Frogmite is a lot less awesome. When it costs routinely 0 to 1 mana, it's great. When it costs
3 to 4 mana?
3 to 4 mana, yeah, it's not where you want to be. But I mean, Sigrist has identified that I think one of the better decks to be in at this table.
And there's a late Thoughtcast. There's also an Apostle's Blessing.
Apostle's Blessing is decent once you have some of the other good cards like Cranial Plating that you're really trying to just get a big hit in there. Thoughtcast, again, if you're the kind of deck that wants Frogmite and Fairy Mechanist, Thoughtcast tends to make it too.
Sigrist has decided he's that type of deck.
Yeah, he's less the 14-land Court Homunculus deck and more the blue-white affinity deck that can actually win a decently long game. It has, good card advantage mechanisms, and Cumulox is a huge payoff here. So if I'm Sigrist right now, I'm feeling very good about this.
Do you like Cumulox more here than Vapor Snag? Does Vapor Snag have a place in this deck?
Vapor Snag is quite good, but given the direction he's heading, Cumulox is one of the bigger payoffs. So I wouldn't be surprised if he just takes the Cumulox. And it's also a great sign. Not only does getting past a Cumulox, 7 cards left in the pack, very good because that means that no one else wanted to take it. It also means that you're not passing it, so no one else is seeing this late Cumulox and from that, thinking Affinity is open. So in pack 1, it's more important to take Cumulox over Vapor Snag, even if the 2 cards are close, because you really don't want anyone else drafting this deck. This deck gets a lot worse, like Randy mentioned. When there's 3 people drafting Affinity, no one's drafting Affinity. You're all just drafting basically, very mediocre deck.
There's a very late Darksteel Citadel.
Yeah, and even though Vapor Snag, again, is great, which he just passed, Darksteel Citadel is key to the deck. There are no other artifact lands, and kind of when you're trying to play cards like Cumulox, Thoughtcast, and Frogmite, you really want to get up to like the 18 artifact, sort of count, and Darksteel Citadel helps a lot with that. Kitesail does too. It's a cheap artifact.
I like Kitesail also for sending Mirror Enforcers to the air.
And this is kind of a hallmark of the deck, again, in Modern Masters 2015, is that you have to get there hard for the deck to be good, because Mirror Enforcer, Frogmite, Thoughtcast, Cumulox, these are all cards that don't work if you have 13 artifacts in your deck. Whereas in Modern Masters 2013, you had, Sanctum Gargoyle and Fairy Mechanist that could work with a slightly lower artifact count.
So he just took a Cloud Elemental. Is that a card that he's looking to play in the deck, or he doesn't want to have to play that card, right?
He should take the Cloud Elemental there. It's clearly the only pick, and it's a card you can play if you're short. But a non-artifact slot has to be at a premium. Oblivion Ring and Arrest and Vapor Snag, these are the kind of cards you want in your non-artifact slots. Cumulox, these are acceptable. Cards like Cloud Elemental just aren't, and that's kind of what this format is about. It's about drafting very linear, very focused decks, and Sigrist is well on his way to doing that. Like, I think he's in really good shape after pack 1.
You feel comfortable with this artifact count if you're coming out of pack 1? It looks like about 5 or 6 artifacts.
I do, especially since there's 2 things. One, Darksteel Citadel's key because that's kind of like free because you get to put it in one of your land slots. And the other is that this is a good sign going forward. He moved in around, pick 4 or 5, and from there saw a bunch more artifacts. I think that you have a pretty optimistic view of the next 2 packs. And this is when drafting is really fun, when you feel like you've identified the right place, and the next couple of packs is just like opening presents, because you're just like, yeah, what am I going to get? Whereas, when you're in Shahar's seat, he wasn't sure where he's going. He's just kind of hoping on the mercy of the packs. I think he's going to be feeling a lot less good.
Homunculus, Fairy Mechanist.
So the most synergistic pick here is the Court Homunculus, and really Court Homunculus Sunlance, I think, is the big decision. Fairy Mechanist is definitely a consideration, but that's the kind of card you want to wheel.
All right, I was just going to say, he might feel like he can get that 9th pick here.
You certainly won't wheel the Sunlance. You know that. That's just a great card. Sunlance is the kind of card you find yourself cutting sometimes because all you want is cards like Court Homunculus. So I kind of like just taking Homunculus and trying to wheel either Gust Skimmer or Fairy Mechanist here. Yeah, Sunlance is great, but you have Oblivion Ring and Arrest. The deck does not actually want 10 removal spells. It
There
wants
he
the
goes.
bare minimum.
Takes the court homunculus.
Yeah, I think that is exactly where you want to be heading.
Is there an upward number that you would
No.
not play of that card?
At some point, you just cut all the non-court homunculus cards, and you cut all the non-plains lands. I mean, the card just gets better in multiples, and you're just like, turn 1 homunculus, turn 2 double homunculus. Like, that's just game.
So there's a Sunlance.
So now it's a little trickier because Rune Servitor is a decent artifact drop, but Sunlance and Narcolepsy, I think, are both premium removal spells, and Rune Servitor is significantly less good than Court Homunculus. I wouldn't be surprised if Sigrist still just takes the Servitor, though. He's got so many powerful cards that rely just on artifacts, and making sure you hit that count is priority number 1. Though, if you were to take a removal spell, I do slightly favor Sunlance over Narcolepsy, even though it is less flexible, just because you want to play more planes in your deck. But if he thinks he's going to end up split because of Thoughtcast and Cumulox, Narcolepsy actually makes a lot of sense.
Is there also a Thoughtcast lurking in the back of that pack?
There's a Hercule's Recall, unfortunately.
Oh,
That's
no.
not a card you want to see.
No.
Someone's going to get a Hercule's Recall essentially for free, and if you just play against that person, all of a sudden they have this great sideboard card. They have Upheaval targeting you just in their sideboard. It just bounces all your permanents. Rusted Relic, this is another big card for the deck. Rusted Relic is kind of like Mirror Enforcer number 2. It's a 4-mana 5/5 Mirror Enforcer, but it needs Metalcroft to do anything, whereas Mirror Enforcer sometimes you can cast for a poor amount of mana but still have it do something. Rusted Relic's either on or off. But I do like Rusted Relic, and I think that's the direction he's heading.
If you're thinking about being the white deck, do you think about that Noblest of War if you're like, well, I might cut these blue cards?
The problem is you just took Narcolepsy, you have Thoughtcast and Cumulox. Sure. I just don't think you're heading that direction.
So maybe if he had the Sunlance, he might consider it a little
right,
more. He obviously took note of it.
Yes, if you had taken Sunlance over Narcolepsy there, then you're just talking 2 blue cards to get rid of. That's very different than talking 3, especially since those 3 are quite strong, or at least 2 of them are very, very good.
So there's a Frogmite.
Oh, there's a repeal. I'm glad Sigrist takes note of the repeal. You should pay close attention to that. But Frogmite, I think, is really where he wants to be here. Just because it's the kind of card that if it doesn't get there, yeah, it's very poor, but it makes all your other cards better. And that's just where you want to be when you're drafting this artifact deck. It's not a normal deck. This isn't a normal format.
Right, and he can go like Homunculus, turn 2, Homunculus, Darksteel, Citadel, Frogmite, right? Like that's like the insane opening draw.
Yeah, and even if he goes turn 1 Homunculus, just turn 2, 2-drop artifact, turn 3, another artifact and a Frogmite, that's still quite good.
Yeah.
So
there's a Somber Hoverguard.
There's Somber Hoverguard and there's Gusskimmer, but Blinding Soul Eater is great for the deck as well. Blinding Soul Eater is an artifact and a removal spell all rolled into one. There's also an Emrakul to Aeon's Torn, so... So this is classic curve consideration of Gusskimmer over Soul Eater, but I mean, I think you would take note of the Gusskimmer, but first of all, you think you might wheel one of those. There's a pretty good chance. And Blinding Soul Eater is just such a more powerful card.
Yeah. And a card that's also going to get eaten by other decks that are not artifact decks.
Well, no, it's the Soul Eater. It eats other.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Blinding Soul Eater will be taken by anyone playing white or playing aggressive decks. You can activate it with just Phyrexian mana, so Black-Red Bloodthirst frequently does play that card.
So Somber Hoverguard, Sphere of the Suns.
That's more the bitterness of seeing the Tarashi's Grasp than the wanting to take it. This is, I think, a very close pick between Somber Hoverguard and Sphere of the Suns. It's funny, again, Sphere is kind of like Darksteel Citadel in that if you can play 1 or 2 spheres over lands, then you've upped your artifact count and you fixed your mana. When you're playing a 16 land count deck, then
he
the
took
mana.
the
He took the
Tarashi's
Grasp. Wow,
yes.
That is aggressive. I'm surprised that Sigrist took Tarashi's Grasp. I guess he feels like he's going to definitely get enough playables and wants A, sideboard option against other decks, and B, not to have people, Tarashi's Grasp his Mirror Enforcers. So this pack's kind of a miss. So there's no card here who'd tell you. I like to take an Ulamog for value.
Right, you could take the Crusher or the Ulamog.
Whoa, is that a foil Ulamog? Well, that changes things completely. Now it's a windmill slam. Look, this is the World Championships, but that's a foil Ulamog.
Siggy did tell me he likes to play Commander. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can't blame him. I think that's a very clear pick. You can just demonstrate the value right there. Somber Hoverguard is another good one.
How is Telling Time?
Not really what you want in this deck.
Okay.
That's more of a 5-color card where you're digging for like your specific, giant bombs, and you have time to kill and mana to burn. This deck, you're trying to use all your mana, and you're trying to spend all your time playing threats. I don't love Wayfarer's Bauble. Even though it's an artifact, you can't crack it and get the benefit and still have it be an artifact. So it's kind of like a pretty bad trade-off there.
You get a mana, then you go down a mana.
Right. It's not really serving a purpose. Well, this is a nice pickup. I do like Spirit of the Suns in this deck. I don't think that's a bad card. Even though it looks more like a ramp card, I actually like it more in these kind of decks than I do the ramp decks.
Well, it's either that or Apostle's Blessing from him. He does take the artifact.
Yeah, Apostle's Blessing is that kind of card I rarely find fitting in because it doesn't take up a threat slot or an artifact slot, and you just, again, don't have very many cards like that. And, oh, there's the Hercules recoil. Yeah, he's slamming that
I mean, if
one.
he took the Tarashi's Grasp, he's definitely taking that.
Look, Sigrist just wants to win the mirror match. He's ready.
Yeah, the thing about the Sphere is really nice. Is a card like Cumulac, it gets you that second blue, and
Yeah,
it gets you
fixing
an
the
artifact
colors
mana.
is very relevant, as well as upping your artifact count and even accelerating you.
There's the
No,
Noblest
I mean, the
of
Noblest
War.
of War is still here. I think you just take it now.
Yeah.
Because there's also a chance if Pack 3 goes swimmingly, you could end up, Sigrist could have enough playable artifacts and white cards to be mono white, in which case Noblest is a very real consideration.
There's no number of blue cards you can play at that point, though. If you decide to play the Noblest.
If you're playing Noblest, if you're playing a quintuple white card, then not really, no. That guy can't imagine a mana base I'd be happy about. Man, Sigrist is making out like a bandit here. He gets an Emrakul too? Like, he's going to get to do well in the draft because his deck looks great so far.
Yeah.
And he's got a pair of Eldrazi. And Somber Hoverguard with 2 cards left.
Yeah, that was
I mean, that's
insane.
just a great sign. Like, even if he doesn't end up wanting all these Somber Hoverguards, there's a chance he doesn't play all of them. Getting it with 2 cards up means absolutely no one is going to be taking his Court Homunculi next pack.
So let's take a look at where he's at right now. And so like opening this next pack, you just really want to see Court Homunculus.
You just want the cheap artifacts. Sigrist has the high end here. He's got, Cumulax, Somber Hoverguard if he wants it. Yeah, Emrakul, Ulamog, the whole curve. But he's got the big threats. He's even got Fairy Mechanist at 4, which is near the high end. Rusted Relic. Double Hoverguard. He just wants the cheap cards. Luckily, we know because we're time travelers, he's going to get a Cranial Plating, which is obviously insane.
Unbelievable.
That's just one of the best cards for the archetype overall, especially with cards like Glenhawk Idol. But I think all he wants is cheap cards now. He's got these Frogmites he's got to enable. He's got 2 Frogmites, and he really wants artifacts he can play for 0, 1, or 2 mana. Not having
Do you get to the point where you take a Darksteel Citadel over a sort of middle playable creature?
Yeah, like for example, Somber Hoverguard versus Darksteel Citadel, I don't think is close. I even think Mirror Enforcer versus Citadel, you just take Citadel. At this point, that is the card you want, the kind of card you want more than you want the top end. And that's really the danger with drafting this deck, isn't that you don't get enough top ends, that you don't get enough enablers.
Well, there's a Frogmite.
Which is not, Indomitable Archangel is a nice one. So that's, a 4/3 for 4 in most decks. But in this deck, if you have Metalcraft, it makes all your artifacts untargetable. So I think that's, or 4/4 rather. I think that is the card he's going to end up taking. There aren't very many artifact cards you want, but that is one of them.
And there's reasonable chance based on how these packs have gone.
Oh yeah,
there's
a really good chance the Frogmite comes back around.
Yeah. So yeah, Indomitable Archangel is the pick.
Yeah, I like that pick.
And now it's time to get the goods.
I think
Shahar. I think it's the next pack.
Yeah, I think it's one more pack in the future here, but I mean, still, this pack's going to be good for Sigrist regardless. Even setting aside the Cranial Plating, which is obviously a big steal, the rest of the pack is just, it's got cards he wants, like the second Ulamog.
There's another Oblivion Ring. Do you start thinking about Gust Skimmer over Oblivion Ring?
No, we're not at that point yet. Okay. Oblivion Ring is too good. Also, it is a little worrisome that neither of the other Gust Skimmers wield. Yeah. Which is kind of funny. You would not normally expect that to happen.
But those would go into like a Blue-White Skies deck or...
Yeah, there are other decks that would want them. I'm still mildly surprised there, but I still think you have Oblivion Ring here. It's close. It's funny that it's close because Sigrist's deck is looking so good that he just wants to make sure that he's got the cards to enable his high end, but Oblivion Ring is just...
Do you know how close he is to completing his playset of Ulamogs?
Well, I think he's hoping to wheel that one to make a start. What he really needs is a Kozilek to get the the full Eldrazi sampler.
The full roster.
Yeah. So.
There's a Guile. There's a Rune Servitor. There's Darksteel Citadel.
So here's a pick where there's 2 enablers. There's Servitor and Citadel. Not 100% sure which one you want here. Both of them are exactly what you are looking for. And I would lean towards Darksteel Citadel, I think, but I can't fault you if your creature count needs upping, then take the Rune Servitor. It's also worth noting that with the Archangel and blue cards and Cumulax, Darksteel Citadel has a bit of a cost.
Sure.
But the one with the higher upside for sure is the
Assuming
Citadel.
he still plays the Cumulux, he has white, and blue.
Yeah. So he did take the Citadel, which I think does have the higher upside. I do like that pick. Just because when it works out, it's great. It's a 0-mana artifact. You get to play as your land drop. And that's just really powerful. Whereas Servitor is just fine. It's the card that'll get you there, but it's not really what you want.
Cranial Plating.
Oh yeah, this pick's not close to being close. Sigrist is now trying to figure out if he's going to wheel anything. The answer is probably not.
You know what? There probably is another blue-white artifact deck because we also saw an Aethersworn Aethercast Knight in I think the opening pack that Mike Sigrist had.
It could be a blue-white deck that's like you said, Skies, because the Knight's fine there.
Yeah.
It could just be like a blue-white aggressive deck. It's possible there's another artifact deck too, and it's just spaced such that Somber Hoverguard was with, like, for example, Sphere of the Suns, and that deck decided they wanted Sphere of the Suns. Yeah, the Gusskimmer's not wheeling is a sign, but I mean the fact that Sigrist got a fifth pick cranial plating, like
Cranial Plating.
obviously he's in the clear.
A giant neon sign says vacancy.
Yeah.
Thoughtcast. Cryptic Command.
Oh, but Glenhawk Idol is just
Glenhawk
insane.
Idol. Oh my gosh.
This is basically Court of Homunculus and Glenhawk Idol are the two best cards to be taken at this point, and Glenhawk Idol is probably even better. Now that you have cranial plating, plating Glenhawk Idol is absurd. It's this evasive creature that can't be killed by sorcery speed spells. It's like an upside.
Right.
I mean, it can't block, but who wants to block if you have a cranial plating? What I really want to see is double Sphere of the Suns moving cranial plating at instant speed with black. I mean, that's something that comes up every now and then, not very frequently.
There's Frogmite.
And then there's Fairy Mechanist. Carapace is also a cheap enabler here, and especially if you think you might wheel the Frogmite in your opening pack, which is a very distinct possibility, you want to balance the number of Frogmites you have with the number of cards like Copper Carapace or like Darksteel Citadel, because drawing 3 Frogmites is kind of a disaster if you don't draw the other enablers.
He does take the equipment there, the Copper Carapace. Gives him the, 3 1-drops, 2... and the 2 Darksteel Citadels.
Yeah, which is a good start. Soon about to be a good finish because there's not a ton of packs left here, but there's enough left to pick up a couple more playables.
It's a very late Air Servant.
And a foil Eye of Ugin to go get his foil Ulamog.
a cross linear deck.
I do like Repeal. I mean, it might be a shock, but yeah, neither Air Servant or Repeal is exactly the thing I love the most out of this pack, but
yeah, he goes with
I'm not going to argue against the pick.
Yeah.
There's no way I would argue against taking Repeal here. The drawback to Air Servant is, of course, that it costs 5 mana. And the upside to Repeal is that it's great.
There's another Copper Carapace. Was that another Fairy Mechanist at the back?
No, it's a Repeal.
Oh, it's another.
I like the Carapace here. So.
Yeah. Again, can't block, but...
Yeah, blocking not a big theme in this deck, though you can block if you repeal your own equipment and then block. There you go, technology.
All right, we're just winding down the picks here.
And now we're in the mode of, did Frogmite wheel, did Rune Servitor or Gusskimmer wheel?
Well, a Fairy Mechanist wheeled.
I like Mechanist a lot more than Thoughtcast here because the 3 equipment. Yeah. Having a flyer is very valuable once you have plating and double Copper Carapace, so I like taking that.
And you would at this point, just from remembering what he's drafted, you would play all 3 equipments?
Yes, I think so. I think the fact that the 2 1-drops are just so good at getting your cheap affinity cards out sooner is just very valuable. And having double Glenhawk Idol, double Mechanist, maybe even the Cloud Elemental at this point, depending on where the playables end up, though probably not. Just like flyers is a good theme.
Probably not an Elementals deck at the table the way this draft played out, but he's like not letting anyone get a free Smoke Raider.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing to consider is that if there's a pack for nothing that has nothing for you, don't let someone wheel the free Smoke Braider. And that might be a reason you won't wheel Frogmite, is one of the people upstream of Sigrist might have noticed, like, there's a ton of affinity cards, there's nothing in this pack. All right, I'll take a Frogmite here because it'll hurt that deck, which looks very good. Wow, that's a very late Aether Snipe. There's also Simic Growth Chamber, which the deck could play, but I like Aether Snipe.
Yeah.
Sigrist has actually got his option of like powerful cards and synergy cards, and he gets to like play double Oblivion Ring, Aether Snipe. He gets to play all these cards.
And gets a third to last pick Thoughtcast.
Yeah, it's not clear if he wants all the Thoughtcasts. He might have enough artifacts, and especially cheap ones, that running both Thoughtcasts is fine, but they're not a huge priority. I like Boilerworks here.
Yeah, takes the Boilerworks.
If you're going to play Aether Snipe in your deck, Boilerwork gets a lot better. Just having bounce lands to get up to 6 mana.
Waking Nightmare.
There we are.
Wow. So give me a grade on this deck.
Oh, this deck's an A. I don't think it's an A+. I think it could have used 2 more core homunculus or homunculi to be an A+, but I think it's a solid A, especially seeing what we saw at the table. Now we've seen 2 of the 8 players draft. We saw Shahar's draft. We've seen the packs that have gone through, and it's not like we saw, an incredibly good green-white tokens deck getting passed, for example. So I think given what we saw, if Sigrist doesn't have one of the top couple of decks at the table, I'd be very surprised.
And grade the lesson. Like the lesson, you open Midnight Banshee, it's pretty hard for a lot of players to get away from a card like that, but, goes in on a 3rd or 4th pick, Glenhawk Idol.
Yeah, he took Midnight Banshee, Oblivion Ring Arrest, Glenhawk Idol, which obviously means you're kind of ditching the Midnight Banshee at that point. And that's something a lot of players have trouble with, but Sigrist obviously doesn't.
So I'm gonna give him an A on the lesson as well.
Yeah, that works.
All right, from the World Championships, Luis Scott-Vargas, Brian David-Marshall, sending it back to the desk.